Everybody, welcome back to Monsters of Design. This is episode number 2. And if this is your first episode, pull up a seat, hang out with us. This is a podcast where every episode we tackle design problems, design things through the lens of a monster. So last episode, we talked about scope creep through the lens of the scope creep monster. And this week, we talk about Ego Maniac. I'm going to hand it off to Jon, my co-host.
Yeah. So, like Brian was saying, this is our second episode. We are super excited. We are starting to line up a lot more. We have a hit list of monsters that we are super excited to talk about. And we also have a really awesome list of really amazing people that we are going to start bringing in to talk about those monsters with us. And so this week we have Kevin Tudball, who is a designer turned illustrator. And he happens to be the illustrator that is doing everything you are seeing in terms of Monsters of Design. So all the branding, all the t-shirts and stickers that we're starting to show you guys on Instagram. So definitely go follow us on Instagram at Monsters of Design, and then on Twitter at Slay Tame Love, and stay up to date on all that stuff. And I think you're going to be very pleased with what you're seeing. We're super excited. We can't wait to get that stuff and wear it ourselves, and hopefully get you all fitted with some sweet shirts that Kevin has illustrated.
And with that, let's get into it.
Here we go. So, here it is, episode number 2, Monsters of Design.
Hell yes.
It's a Saturday morning. We've all had our coffee. We're chilling out, just painting a picture for everybody out there. And this episode, we are going to figure out how to slay, tame, and love the monster known as Ego Maniac. And with us today, we have Kevin Tudball. Brian, I don't know if you want to give Kevin a proper intro.
Basically, what you all need to understand is Kevin Tudball is a wizard. He stands on top of a mountain and attracts lightning with his rod and then creates magic. So what that also means is Kevin Tudball is an illustrator, he's a graphic designer, and also a creative director. And I live in Santa Cruz. I see your work, Kevin, all over the place in Santa Cruz. He has done branding for some big name coffee folks like Verve Coffee Roasters. He's also done some branding for Cat and Cloud. These are 2 big Santa Cruz coffee names. Kevin also went up to San Francisco and I believe did branding for 4 Barrel. Yep. So he has left a huge footprint in the coffee scene in terms of branding, but he's also worked for Kaliva. Is it Kaliva or Kaliva? Kaliva Cannabis, Google, O'Neill, Reef, Netflix. Your work is everywhere. And Kevin specializes in branding, packaging, apparel, and general fucking awesomeness. And we thought he would be a great person to talk to about Ego Maniac.
Yeah, one kind of like even I think what's really cool about all of this too is that when I met Kevin, probably, I don't know, 15 years ago, so it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's 15.
Kevin moved out here when he started his design career, and I was kind of at the beginning of my design career as well. He was at Frog Design, and I was at a little boutique agency in the South Bay area. And, you know, we were both into music, into design, and so we quickly became friends. And it's been really cool to kind of see how we both started in a more traditional graphic design industry. And since then, we've sort of, you know, moved out of that traditional industry, but I think we've always really connected on that design philosophy, even though I'm doing more video and photography and he's doing more illustration these days. So that's kind of where Kevin for me, it was like a no-brainer to bring him into this when we started talking about doing it as just a clothing thing, and then it became a podcast. So, that's another really awesome reason why Kevin is here today to, be our second guest and help us take down, tame, and love another monster.
The Ego Maniac. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for having me, dudes.
Yes, thank you for being here, Kevin. On this Saturday. So, let's start it. Kevin, how are you doing? Like, how's today? How are you?
Today's great. It's warm up here in Portland. Just got back from Michigan, visiting the family for the first time in a year and a half. I'm feeling good. It's good to be in my cozy little home.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And you just got married recently during the pandemic.
I got married during the pandemic, and I bought a house during the pandemic. So
I know.
We just took the worst year ever and made it like the best year ever. So
lemons,
that's awesome.
Yeah. Lemonade.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
What was that like? Getting married remotely. What was that like?
We thought that would be like the weirdest thing, and it would be really hard to not make it feel like doing it over Zoom. We worried like, will all the emotion get lost? Will it feel odd doing our vows over a computer? We were together, but it was really still like a lot of people felt it was almost more intimate in some ways because they were right up seeing you on the camera close, and we could respond and talk to them. And it was really special, obviously super memorable. And then, when the whole thing was over and we could just shut our computer, then it was just us, which was like really nice. And we got some carry out sushi and hung out at our house. And I was like, went to the park for a little walk. This is a nice way to get married. Really, really relaxing day.
That's awesome, man.
You're like, it's just more my pace, y'all. Gonna be honest.
More my pace.
Yeah.
Exhausted after all the partying. This is a really nice, nice mellow wedding.
Yeah, that's great.
And we could have our cat and dog there, which is always our wedding dream that could never happen. So it worked out.
The perfect introvert wedding.
Yeah, seriously. And how are you guys like enjoying or maybe navigating is the better word, this kind of transition into a slow, like a more post-pandemic, in the U.S. I don't think the rest of the world is post-pandemic, but at least in the U.S., especially on the West Coast. So you went to Michigan. You couldn't do that a year and a half ago.
No, I was
like, how did all that feel?
Oh, it felt like drinking a gallon of coffee or something. Like it was like a little overwhelming, and you're like buzzing and feel kind of good, but also kind of like freaked out at the same time. Like going into the airport, and then just being surrounded by tons of people, and then getting on an airplane all crammed together, and then getting home, and I just spent like 7 straight days of socializing with family and friends after a year and a half of just, being in your house and seeing like a person every once in a while. It was really like a rush. But after 3 or 4 days, I felt like, it just started to feel normal. But those first few days were just like, whoa, just like intensity.
Yeah, I bet.
Overall, just, human contact is a good thing. I got my year of introvert activity, and now
it's turned you into an extrovert.
A little bit.
Yeah, probably. Maybe. We'll see.
I went to Abbott Square last night in Santa Cruz, which is sort of like an outdoor situation where you can have drinks and stuff. And I think this was like my first real social engagement. And I'm still recovering from it, to be honest. So your boy had 2 whole lagers. Went real crazy. Went real fucking crazy. And I woke up this morning and I feel like the Titanic hit the iceberg. And my body is just like, what did you do to me? 2 beers. Yeah. And it's like, dude, we didn't go that hard. We didn't hit an iceberg. We hit an ice cube. Okay? Like you're fine. You're chilling. And people were
but last night
Oh,
You
yeah.
were king of the world.
Dude, 2 beers. Wild shit. Actually, the fact that I'm hungover after 2 beers, like, I'm a gay man during Pride Month. Like, that's kind of homophobic, okay? So, it's like, come on, man. But yeah, it's been interesting. Like, people have totally forgotten how to people watch. So, like, I was trying to people watch, and, like, we're all just staring at each other too long.
Totally.
It's just great. It's just so fucking unhinged. All right, so we have a monster that we're gonna build a relationship with, and
Yes.
that monster,
Let's get into it.
that monster's a fucking egomaniac, which
Yes.
is great because the monster's called Egomaniac.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
Brutal one.
what I think when we have like our hit list of monsters, and it's probably about 10 or 12 deep right now. So we've got plenty of material coming at you guys over the next few months. But this one was really important to us to touch on first, partly because we brought it up during the scope creep one, the first episode. And it kind of came up a little bit. And when Brian and I were talking about it, we're like, oh, let's make sure we really hit on the point that these monsters are not clients. They are things outside of designers and clients that both the designer and client deal with, either on like an internal level, or if it's sort of like that external cloud that hangs over the whole project. And so we kind of want to make that point that we're not hating on clients. What we're really trying to do is just unpack these issues that we deal with and creatively speak to them as if they were monsters. Yeah. And ego's great because that's definitely something that as designers we can say, oh yeah, we have to deal with that because it's really easy when you're in a quote unquote creative industry. And I definitely say quote unquote because all of us bring creativity into whatever we're doing to make a living. But this one, it's for the most part, it's things we see visually or auditorily. And I think it's easy for us to go, look what I did. Look how pretty that is. I'm so proud of it. And then you start developing an ego and you're before you know it, you're an asshole to the people you work with. And, that can go for clients and designers. And so I think if we can separate it from, who we are and the great work that we do, we can kind of unpack it a little bit and, get a little bit better at what we do.
So, Kevin,
yes.
when we talk about when we talk about the monster egomaniac, what's some of the first things that come up for you?
I was thinking about it a lot this week, and it quickly went from, oh, this is such an awful thing, to like, again, just like your last episode, this is a thing that requires some balance. So like right off the bat, it's like your initial gut response is almost like when you hear like the emotion jealousy. You're like, oh, ego, bad. It's just bad. It's no good. There's no room for it. But I think there's the need to have a little in our industry. It's both necessary and an awful thing. My first thought went to, you're young, you think your stuff is just so amazing right off the bat, even though it's like pretty rough. Like when you're first starting out, I look back at my early portfolio and it's like, ooh, I was feeling cocky about this stuff. All right. And then you start to get good. And I found when I would have something that was a success or something that, got reposted a lot or bought by a ton of people, and, I was getting a lot of compliments on it. Yes, my ego was getting bigger, but also it was preventing me from doing more work. I started getting scared to make another thing because what if it didn't live up to that? And I think that's really tied into ego. If I didn't have the ego that I was trying to preserve, then I'd be more willing to like make some mistakes and just create. Like when you are younger and you're just like, everything I'm making is awesome. Who cares? I'm just going to put out any like song or any art piece or any design into the world because why not? So I think ego can really stand in the way, especially in the age of social media. And then just to flip it, is without any ego. I know amazing designers and artists who are just like, I don't really post anything. I'm not very good. They like don't have any ego, and you're like, dude, just get a little bit of ego, because like you're amazing, and just show everyone how good this is. Get a little bit of that, ego and like self-esteem are kind of tied together in a little way.
Yeah, that's interesting. I almost feel like, it's good to understand, the separation between ego and confidence. And I think that, ego, it's like a self-centeredness, but then confidence, which I think you're kind of getting at, I think you actually have to have a sense of humility to be confident. And I think that's what's interesting. It's like, what's at the root of that? And if you're like, I'm self-centered, I'm better than you, I deserve this, ego. But if you're saying like, I'm humble, like I'm just a piece of the puzzle, you actually start developing a confidence that looks a lot different than ego. I mean, I know that's something I'm constantly working on. There's so many times in meetings that like I have to like pull back, and like I start feeling like I'm the expert in the room. I'm the one that knows the best thing to do. Maybe that's the case in some ways, but just because someone might not have the exact experience I have doesn't mean they're not able to speak to what the best thing is to do in that moment as a team. And I think that humility brings that confidence. You can be confident in yourself and the people you're working with,
I'm really resonating, John, with one of the things you just said, and Kevin, you were kind of touching on it too, is, this developing a confidence, and how that requires humility. And so much of our journey developing our specific craft as designers, artists, creatives, is getting to an honest assessment of our capabilities and being very clear about what we can do and what we can't do. And ego, man, ego has gotten in my way a lot. I'm not an illustrator. I'm not a graphic designer. This more shows up with words as I'm, writing for a client. But, oh man, just ego. Yeah. Messy bitch. Ego Maniac is just a messy bitch. And it has, So as Kevin, you were developing and refining your own voice as an illustrator, what did your relationship with your ego look like back then?
I think, I think right out of art school, I had a little bit more of an ego, which maybe, it's again, I keep fighting for like, is there something good about ego? I had the ego out of art school, which gave me enough confidence to be like, no, I can apply to all these companies on the West Coast. They should all probably want me. I draw these great cartoons that are, that are decent, and and they should all want me. I applied to 13 companies and I got one job offer. Puts your ego in check a little bit. But at the same time, I just feel like when you're young, you just got so much of that fire that keeps you like from letting that beat you down. So once I was on the West Coast, it was again like, no, I'm so good. They're probably just not seeing my applications. Like I gotta, I'll just keep applying, and someone will eventually see how good I am. And I think, eventually, once you've had your work critiqued enough by coworkers or by bosses or clients, you start to get a little more realistic about, oh yeah, I have a lot to learn. Oh yeah, I'm only 22. I have some, totally. I got to put in my 10,000 hours. I've put in my 4 years of art school. I think I'm really good. I haven't done 10,000 hours of client work or anything like that.
But we have the talent. The talent's enough, Kevin. We're talented. Right? And people tell me I'm talented.
Yeah, I just heard another illustrator say like to his podcast audience, well, yeah, we can all draw. Yeah, we can all draw, but that's not like what's gonna get you clients. And you have to have the
Yeah.
ideas, you have to build the brand, you have to do all these other things. Like, yeah, we're all illustrators because we can draw. That's why you illustrate, but that doesn't mean you're a great illustrator.
Yeah.
I think the ego has ebbed and flowed, and I know you're probably going to do an episode on this, but when it ebbs and flows and it gets really low, you can start to slip into imposter syndrome. You can start to feel like, I'm not actually a good illustrator at all. Why did I think I was so good? It's it's like a little bit of a roller coaster with ego.
Totally. Yeah, I'm curious. I remember when and I can't remember if these are back to back. What you were at Frog Design in the Bay Area, and then you went to O'Neill next. Was that the next thing you did?
Yeah, I was at O'Neill next.
Yeah, I remember you went down to things like San Clemente or something. You were down there, and I remember coming to visit you with some friends, and you were kind of like, we were like, oh, like, tell us about all this. Some of your coworkers, we all went out, and you were telling me about all the in-store displays and stuff you were designing, and I was just like, holy shit, dude, this guy is like killing it right now. Like, he's designing stuff that are going in these surf shops and these like really awesome, photographic, designy kind of things that were up on the wall and light boxes. And I mean, for me, if I was in that space, and I think we were probably like still early mid-20s at that point. And
yeah, I think I was 24 when I started.
Yeah, like if that was me, I mean, I was still kind of figuring stuff out and going between video and graphics, and it hadn't quite like hit on what I really love to do yet. I would have definitely been dealing with some ego. Like, did that job and that brand that you work for, how did that maybe specifically, bring that monster into the room, or how did it actually maybe, help you work through it?
I think it was definitely present. And again, looking back at my work from that time, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, it was with a team. It was more corporate work. Some of it was, just like a photo of someone surfing with a logo on it. So it wasn't necessarily my most like impassioned creative work. But at the same time, there's definitely a little bit of that bragging, like, I work for O'Neill. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I work for a surf company. No big deal. I'm killing it. I think there was a lot of that early on before I started working in coffee, where I thought it was all about what name I could get on my resume. Like what are if I can brag about where I'm working, that's like pretty awesome. And then to go to coffee, where half the people I would tell, oh yeah, I work for Verve, and Verve's pretty huge now, but at the time they had like one shop in Santa Cruz, and I got hired when they're opening their next two in Santa Cruz. It's like, anyone outside of Santa Cruz, I work for Verve Coffee, and they're like, wait, what? Like, I thought you were doing like, I thought you were doing really good. Like, weren't you at O'Neill? Like, oh, are you like, oh, you're pouring coffee?
Regressing.
Like yeah. So it was like, that was a little bit of an ego hit, which is funny because now it's like one of my most proud things I've worked on. But it's still one of the things that brings me the most client work are people who have seen my Verve designs. But at the time, there was that little hit to my ego where I was really proud of the work I was doing. But, when I would tell someone back home, oh, I work for a coffee roaster, there wasn't that name recognition. There wasn't the same excitement as when I said, like, oh, I work for O'Neill, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, that's everywhere. And even with Frog, people might not know the name, but then you list the clients you're working for, and you're just like, all these tech companies, and people are just like, whoa, you're doing amazing stuff. And you're like, I guess I'm doing some corporate logo placement and some, I'm not necessarily excited about the work, but I really am feeling that people are stroking my ego. That's really nice.
I was kind of thinking about, following that this way we're trying to work through these monsters and sort of unpacking it like we've been doing, and then it moves into that sort of like tame category. And it's interesting because I feel like you were kind of getting into how almost your bout with the monster known as Ego Maniac tamed you in a way, because it caused you to like actually say like, no, I am really the one who's like dealing with this monster right now. It's not my client, it's not my coworker, it's me, and I'm owning that now, and that is the only way I'm able to start like taming this. Like, you haven't fully embraced it necessarily, yet, in a way that like it can be healthy. You're alluding to that, but it's interesting. Like, maybe you could speak to that a little bit. Like, how have these situations helped you sort of tame that monster?
I think in looking back at some of the stuff I just said, it started like reminding me of some different things. I think the early on in my career decisions, they were always a little bit ego based, because I always viewed it as, what can I tell people? When I tell people about my career, when I tell people of what I've done, is it going to sound cool? Is it going to like impress people? And I think some of the best career decisions I've made were when I could check the ego and set it aside and go like, are you happy? Are you like enjoying yourself? Are you feeling fulfilled? Because when I did that, that's when I did end up at Verve. But in between that period, in between O'Neill and Verve, I went and worked as a barista for a year and almost completely stopped designing. I was doing some freelance, but that was like a bit of a gut check for me. When I set the ego aside, and then I go back home, or I tell some friends or family, I'm just working as a barista at like a little coffee shop. No, it wasn't even Verve yet. It was the Abbey.
Oh, the Abbey. That's maybe where I actually first.
That's where we first met.
That's where we first met.
Yeah, and that was a little bit of like an ego check. Like, all right, I felt like I had to kind of like step down, like go down, and then start the climb over, because I realized I was kind of going up the wrong ladder. And I think a lot of that probably had to do with ego, wanting to look like my career was really good, wanting to like find a way to like make good money, important things. But in order to look at like, okay, are you happy? What would actually make you happy? Is it making fulfilling work? Because you can actually do that at really small companies who no one's ever heard of. You can have a lot of fun and you can make a living. You might not make as much money, but you might be more creatively fulfilled, and down the line that can pay off.
Yeah. Man, the Abbey, I have a quick aside about the Abbey. So some of my closest friends have come from the Abbey, so I really want to make that clear. And I had some of my best, coffee there. You had to have a really developed skill set to work there, and really good shit there. So they are attached to this, church, Vintage Faith. And I remember when I was there, and I was like talking to some of the baristas, and I was like, you know what? I'll look them up on Facebook and just see what's what. So, this like church coffee shop, it was its own coffee shop, but it was attached to this church. Still secular inside. But I looked them up on Facebook, and you look at like where they're located, somebody had put it in incorrectly. And that what they failed to realize is there is another Abbey in California.
Oh, in LA?
In LA, the gay bar.
Yep.
in LA.
And you were pumped?
Yeah. Oh my God. I was like, this is the gay agenda.
Like, here we go.
I was like, listen, motherfuckers, this is my house now. And I didn't tell anybody for a minute. Like, I was just like, oh God. And every time you'd go onto the Abbey's Facebook page, it would bring you to the gay bar. Oh God, it was
definitely
incredible.
Got some messages from some friends in LA who were like, dude, I didn't realize. That's cool.
That's
man.
awesome. I'm so stoked for you in this life path. Like, I'm open. But I really miss their cookies. Anyways, so shout out to Marilyn Biggers. Okay. But yeah, so you're working at the Abbey. And And what were some of the steps that like got you to the Abbey? Like, I know for me, when work has dried up and I've had to do other things, that just a number of things have shifted, and oh boy, I really do come into contact with my own ego. What was the road that got you there and then back into design work?
I did the quarter life crisis, leave my job in the middle of a recession and go travel around Australia move.
Fuck yeah.
The one that we all do that, right?
Fuck yeah.
Such a typical thing, though. I totally did the, just like quit my job. I was like, I need to do some soul searching. I need to figure out like what am I doing? I thought, once I was at O'Neill, I was like, well, this is it. All I have to do is get out of the marketing department over to the t-shirt department.
Yeah.
And then I'm good for the next 40 years of my career. Right. Then I started realizing do I want to make just t-shirts for the next 40 years? Is that what am I actually doing? What's my actual long-term goal here? So that was between that and getting to the Abbey, I just spent a few months roaming around, journaling and drawing all the time, brainstorming. Like I have a journal that's all filled from my trip in Australia, and it's all career thoughts. There's no personal journaling. It's all what do I want to do with my career? Am I wanting to be an artist or a designer? Because that's a very different path. And I think a lot of designers bring their artist ego into it. No, this should be about me. And especially for illustrators, my illustration should be front and center. And you're well, that's more of an artist. That's more of, you're not solving a problem for someone necessarily when you're bringing your ego from your own creative work over there. So, I think I had to take a step back there and just kind of assess that and go okay, if you want to do design, what's that going to look like? My dream was always to be a freelancer. And I started thinking okay, well, you're not really freelancing. You're working your way into some of these bigger companies. If you want to be a freelancer, you're going to have to take that risk sometime.
Scary. The risk is scary.
Yeah, totally. And that was, quitting my job was probably the biggest risk I ever took, because it was 2010. It was right in the recession. And when I got back from Australia, a buddy of mine named Brian in Santa Cruz hooked me up with a job at the Abbey. And that just that essentially became an extension of the Australia trip. It was a way for me to make money, but it was a full year to a year and a half of just working at a coffee shop, doing as much drawing as I could outside of it, doing making music, recorded an album. It was just creative time. Okay, you shaved off a lot of the things that were stroking your ego and making it bigger. Now it almost felt okay, now I have the freedom. I've been able to cut off the ego off me, and I could just make stuff without thinking so much about who's gonna see it or what are people gonna say. And then when I applied at Verve, I applied as a barista, and they saw my resume was all design work, and it just kind of seamlessly transitioned into me being their designer, but without taking that risk. Which, if you have too big of an ego, at the time, it was set the ego aside, take that risk, and it actually led to probably the smartest career move I could have made. That jump to Verve was the biggest transition piece for me.
Totally. It's so funny how the Abbey, I've known several people who they started working there as a figure it out stage, and in this sort of transitional phase of their life, and they've gone on to that was a very vital milestone for them to like go on to a much bigger career, or even move forward in the coffee industry and become a big name in coffee. Like a lot of people went from the Abbey to Verve to you know, other outfits, and are some of the best you know, baristas around. So that's amazing. So you get to Verve, and then things kind of get jump started again.
Yeah, because you know, we were shaping this brand. They had a logo, they had a branding, like they had a branding package from a design agency in San Francisco. But other than that, we were like building this brand together, and it was a lot of, you know, it felt like a lot of friends just like working on projects together. There wasn't a lot of ego involved. You know, I think eventually it crept back in once Verve started getting more like notoriety and people started seeing my work. And that's when, like the ego comes back. It starts to go like, oh, I'm back. I'm gonna creep in.
It's not a one and done. It's an ongoing battle.
It totally like,
What?
Push it away. It comes right back when you're doing good.
Mm-hmm.
This question's for Kevin. I think this is a good thing for all of us, but including our listeners. Kevin, without, I don't know, breaking an NDA or anything, what was some of your most meaningful rejections you experienced in terms of the work, in terms of pitching work, in terms of whatever comes up for you when I say that? Like,
I mean, right away, there is some of that. Being an illustrator is kind of that perfect hybrid of being a designer and an artist at the same time. You know, you're bringing your own style into the work, so you're really attached to that, and you're kind of a little more precious about it. And then at the same time, you're illustrating for a client. You're trying to develop like a look for them, something that is, you know, speaks to their brand. I think at Verve, it was like a great growing and like learning experience. I'm sure I can only think of one specific design off the top of my head, but you know, you might pitch an idea that you're really passionate about. It's like one of your art pieces, and it's, nope, that doesn't work for us. It's just not right. And you're like, oh, what? I mean, I think it is. I think it is right. I think it's right for you.
Yep.
You know, definitely those moments can feel like a bit of rejection. It's important to have your work critiqued as much as possible, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially early on, like in art school, it was like daily critiques in my studio classes, and that's the early on when you're like 18 and first showing your work and you get it criticized. It's such a oh God, really? Like, they didn't like this?
Don't you realize I'm a genius?
Right?
Yeah, that was me in creative writing at UCSC.
I feel like that critique is such a good like tool. It's like a weapon. And like, I always pull it back because it's fun for me to like bring the analogies into it. But like,
totally,
you know, like it is one of those weapons you can like go after and like really, you know, slay, tame, whatever the, you know, these monsters, and critique is that thing. And it's kind of interesting, even for like future episodes, I kind of want to like identify those things, and maybe Kevin, you can make stickers representing these weapons. Like they're things you'd get while playing Zelda.
I mean, the best for me though, like the best critique is a critique, feedback, whatever you want to call it, that's centered around how can whatever I'm going to say, it needs to be focused on motivating the person to keep doing the work. I feel like, that's some of where the special sauce is. Because sometimes people's ego comes out when they're offering critique. And
sure,
when they're doing that,
if it's your peer,
if it's a peer, a client, or whoever, that ego can come out, and it can be very harmful. It can be very damaging, because the worst thing you can do is offer critique in such a way where it totally discourages the other person from doing work or, plans seed of doubt. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's a good space to be in as a professional. I would say it's when you're first cutting your teeth, it's probably a lot more harmful when you have a lot more insecurity there.
Yeah, and I think that's mostly when you're around your peers.
Yeah.
And you're, you get like, okay, let me critique your stuff. If it looked more like mine, it would be good.
let me give you an example of what you can do.
Yeah.
Look at my laptop over here.
Yeah.
So like I see you're painting with green, but it should be blue. Okay.
Yeah, and I remember at that period too, like we'd get really petty about me and my buddy, we were both illustrators, and we would get frustrated with each other. Like, dude, you painted the eyes on your character the same way as the eyes on mine. That's not cool. Like, that's my signature eye look. Like, that's going to be my thing. People are going to know me for those eyes. Like, you can't do eyes that way.
The big...
So just looking back and being like, oh my God, you're so dumb. What?
A big... I think a big sign is somebody who is still finding their voice or finding their work is somebody who says like, I'm just, I don't want to show you because I don't want this work to get stolen. Like, I don't want,
right.
I don't want you to steal my work. I don't want, anybody to steal it. And I'm like,
yeah, that's when I was in art school, I emailed this artist in LA who just did the most amazing illustrations, and they had I still don't know exactly how he did them. There was like layers of like resin and screen printing, and there was drawing, and it was just so interesting. And so I reached out to him and just said, hey, like, would you mind like just kind of telling me your process a little bit? I'm so curious. It's so interesting. It turns out so cool. And he wrote back and said, absolutely not. You will lift my process. And then my work won't be like special anymore. Like if someone knows how I do this, then that's it for me. And I thought that's so weird. I'm like, I don't know, I'm a student learning. And then I met a different illustrator also in LA in person. And I said to him like, hey, like, I was wondering your process. I've talked to another artist who didn't want to share it with me. It's totally cool. I just really love your work. And he was like, an artist wouldn't share that with you? That's garbage. Like, what do you want to know? I will tell you everything.
Wow,
I will tell you everything I do. Like, you're not, even if you drew the same thing I drew, it's going to look different. It doesn't matter.
What's right there, you just basically proved that ego and confidence are polar opposites. Because to have, like, that person was confident that what they did was good enough that if everyone knew their process, it wouldn't matter. And the other person was not, like, definitely not trying to pass judgment, but what it sounds like is that person didn't feel enough confidence in their work to share that process. I think that's really interesting.
Totally. And actually that first artist, I can't find his work anymore. I think he folded and stopped doing it. And the second artist is still going strong, still a huge name. I was going to say, I feel like, going into the fantasy worlds of monsters, I feel like an ego can often be like a fork in the road. Like, it's like, you can go the ego route, but if you go the other route, like, you might end up somewhere a lot better. And usually, like, you will. Like, it almost seems like this choice. It just makes me think of each time I kind of learn something when I hit a fork in the road like that. And it's like when I left Verve and went to 4Barrel, this is like probably like just a little mini ego moment.
And 4Barrel is a coffee shop in San Francisco. Just
in San Francisco, And I thought, okay, well, they're hiring me because they loved the work I did at Verve, which was true. So they probably just like want me to just keep drawing the way I've been drawing. And of course, as an illustrator or designer, you eventually learn like, no, they need their own look. So like day one, they said like, okay, cool. So you need to start developing a different style of illustration for us. And
how did that feel?
Yeah. That was like that fork in the road of like, oh shoot, like, wait, what? I thought you wanted me for this really just this cool style I do. And it's like, now I'm like
the eyeballs I make.
Like it's like each client obviously needs their own vibe and feeling, and it might have your touch on it. But that was that moment of like, all right, well, I guess I could just go with the ego and say, I quit. I'm going to go freelance then, and I'm just going to keep doing the same thing I did for Verve for everyone else. Like, I loved what I did. And instead, I went on this journey for a few years and started developing a way different style. Like, it's completely different from Verve. And now stepping back, I'm like, wow, now I have like two really distinct things in my portfolio that are very different. It stretched my illustration muscles. It pushed me to like learn to draw in different ways. Usually those moments are like, if you go with the ego, you're not getting the opportunity to grow.
Yeah. I think this has all been like really awesome. And, it's cool. I feel like these conversations, we're kind of like naturally going through that thought process of breaking it down, kind of, learning how to deal with it and then really embracing it at the end. And, now that we've kind of gone through that, I think we're at that point in the episode where we need to put Kevin on the spot and ask him about his favorite superhero.
Oh no!
Kevin, I just want to let you know this is a safe space. So if you're like, hey,
you already know.
Everybody has a favorite.
Okay, superhero. But we also have to ask. Okay, we're gonna ask that, but I also want to ask favorite monsters.
Oh, I was wondering if you would ask this. I was thinking on that the other day.
Okay, yeah, you get to pick favorite superhero or favorite monster.
And it's like a real monster, not like in fiction.
I think with favorite monster, I'm really drawn to like Nosferatu.
Oh,
that version of Dracula.
Yes.
Look at that.
Or like a vampire. It's tough because I don't want to say vampire because I think of all the movies in the last like 15 years and I'm like, ugh, God, what vampires have become. It's just like, ugh. No. But when I think of like that black and white Nosferatu with like his fangs are like in the middle and they're all like long and gnarly looking and he's like bald, just like, complete opposite of sexy. He's just a disturbing vampire. And I'm like, yeah.
There it is.
Totally.
Yeah. I like the old, whenever I do those Drawloween months and I'm drawing all the different monsters, I always am looking at like the old black and white films for like monster inspiration. Just
totally.
Yeah,
dude.
They make monsters too sexy now. It's not right.
I can go down a whole. Okay, Jon. What's your favorite monster right now?
Man, this is a hard one. I haven't thought about this. Well, so actually, I think it kind of works, and it's still a comic book, but it's Swamp Thing.
Oh my God. Yeah. My boy!
I finally got around to the Alan Moore.
Great. Is he growing? Is he growing yams and growing potatoes and giving it to her?
Book one. Yeah.
Oh,
but it's man, so good. I never got into it. I remember as a kid, there was that movie, right? Like that old
Wes Craven one came out. The Wes Craven.
Yeah, and like
that movie rules.
Yeah, and like, man, it's been so long since I watched it as a kid, and I just haven't even thought about it since then. I didn't realize it was Wes Craven. Now
Wes Craven. Okay, really quick, everybody. Okay, There are two Swamp Thing movies. One of them is by Wes Craven. It's the first one. It's before the Alan Moore run. It fucking rules. You need to go watch it. It's like 90 minutes. I think the second one, Return of the Swamp Thing, don't watch that. Bad time.
Yeah.
A little racist. But watch the Wes Craven one. Okay, continue, Jon.
Cool. No, that was... Yeah, I read that in the last year or so, and a friend lent it to me. This always happens. People lend me a book to read, a comic, and it sits on my shelf for like 2 years, and I finally read it. But I finally got around to it, and I was just like, holy cow, this is amazing. And it's like, yeah, just the depth to that character and like the concept of the story where it's like, it's not him, but it is him. Anyways, to understand that, you have to read it.
Was there a Swamp Thing TV show?
Yes, there was. There were several. Okay. I am ready to talk about this. Okay.
I feel like I'm remembering watching it in like the late 80s or
it was on the
90s.
USA Network.
Yeah.
USA
Okay.
Network, yes.
There we go.
And the same guy who played it in the USA Network played Swamp Thing in those movies.
Oh,
So he was like a
interesting.
Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
That was his career.
It
And
gave
then
me nightmares, and that was okay. My
Good.
wife and I were talking about this last night, where she was like, we're talking about scary movies, and like when you watch the movie as a kid, and everyone's like, oh, this movie's fucked me up. And then she was like, yeah, but then there was Legend. And I watched Legend as a kid.
the
and I was
Ridley
definitely too
Scott
young
Tom
for it.
Cruise vehicle.
Yeah.
Oh
And-
my god.
and, Tim Curry playing that like devil.
Devil?
And she was like, that was terrifying, and it gave me nightmares, but I loved it.
Wait,
And, like,
hold
she
on,
and I love
hold
watching
on.
scary movies now. Yeah.
I'm gonna be unhinged.
That's what Swamp Thing was for me.
Wait, where is it?
I think I still kind of have
Okay, wait.
nightmares about that. It's like, anyways.
I'll be right back. Hold
I
on.
love me a good monster. Hence the name of this podcast.
Totally.
Wait, so now we're waiting for Brian. What's
Okay, you know
Brian's?
what I have? The director's
Oh, yeah.
edition of Legend,
Nice.
because the theatrical cut
Yep.
isn't as great, but the director's cut of Legend is fucking great. It's hard to get. It's only on DVD.
Yep.
Legend's a weird movie. It's still, even the director's cut,
It's amazing. Yeah.
it's beautiful to look
well, the
at.
soundtrack is different. For
Yeah,
the director's
Tangerine
cut.
Dream, I think, did
There you go. Yep.
the theatrical.
I can't believe you and my wife have not met, because the fact that you love it on that level,
Yeah.
you and her will just be talking for hours. Because that's the exact same thing for her. She's like, Tangerine Dream. That's what makes this amazing.
Tangerine
So,
Dream, yep.
Yep.
Wow, sorry, I just like,
I love it. That was awesome.
that was great.
What's your favorite monster?
Right now, so it's always changing, right? Right now I'm definitely in kaiju land. So my boy Gamera is a big old turtle. He has jet engines. He can fly. What y'all need to do, if you're listening to this, if you've made it this far, type in Gamera, Gamera, and just look what Google Images throws you. My boy is just a homie and a
Right
half.
now.
Here's the thing:
Homie
I
and a
don't
half.
like
I love
turtles.
Oh yeah, that's a good monster.
He's a great he's a good boy, man. He was
First appearance in 1965.
yeah, and there was a recent trilogy in the 90s that fucking rules. He was created by one of the main rivals to Toho. So kind of their response to Godzilla, and he's good. He's so great. I want like a major Gamera resurgence. He's so fucking cool. And the difference between Gamera and Godzilla is Gamera's more consistently heroic. And it's great.
From now on, it's going to be, because
Monsters and superheroes.
we've exhausted our favorite superhero and monster. Unless that probably will
Yeah, it's gonna
always
be
be
I
changing
think-
for us.
I
you
think-
guys have to answer every week or every
Dude,
month.
I will talk about. Oh, next episode. I promise you, I'm gonna have a fucking different monster. This is why I did this podcast originally. I thought it was gonna be about monsters.
You didn't realize it was about design.
I was like, fine.
So I think a good way to end this out, though, is some like little nuggets of what's to come, especially since we got Kevin here.
Oh,
I think we should give a little preview into some of the
describe it, though.
monsters. Maybe just even the next one. So I guess people are going to see what this one looks like when they hear the episode. So we'll leave it to that. But the next one we want to talk about is the hoverer. Brian, you want to unpack that one a little bit, and Kevin maybe can speak to what it's going to look like.
So I just need.
Oh yeah.
I am so okay. The hover.
And there's a pre-pandemic hover, and then there's a pandemic hover, and I'm really curious to what that does to the
Okay.
future state of the hover.
So the hover, my idea was, hover is kind of inspired by King Ghidorah, our golden dragon boy from Godzilla. And as you know, King Ghidorah has 3 heads because he's just goes a little too hard. He needs 1 head, but he has 3. And those 3 heads are just leaning over. One's thinking really hard, one's frowning and pointing, one's squinting. none of the heads are on the same page, but they're watching you. They're hovering. They're right in your face. And you're like, bruh, what are you doing? I'm excited because it's King Ghidorah inspired.
Yeah. And that was kind of the perfect storm of creative ideation in that moment. We were all talking about this, and it's kind of like 3 heads, and Brian was like, I know exactly what this is. And he pulled up pictures.
I totally had this Exorcist moment where when I realized that my body convulsed, I snapped in half, and I was like, oh my God, I'll be right back. And then I crawled away, came back, and was like, King Ghidorah. And I was salivating. I was extremely excited.
What I think people, we have a guest that we're lining up, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy the episode. And I think what's going to be interesting about the conversation is, like I was saying, what we all kind of know that, there's that Tumblr blog of hovering art director and hovering creative director, whatever it is. And so we're all pretty familiar with that. And I think it's interesting to hear, from someone in a leadership position who's been doing this type of work over the past year, what that's been like, because everyone has their hoverer, even if they are potentially trying not to be one during this pandemic. Yeah. So all of us have been on Slack and Zoom and whatever. And so what has that felt like? Because it's definitely an issue that is not just tied to working with people in the same room.
Absolutely.
And, maybe what is that going to do to the future of this monster industry we are now calling the hoverer?
Yeah, one last thing. Kevin, where can people find you?
Yes.
Find me on Instagram at Kevin Tudball.
How do you spell
Tudball? That's about it. I'm
Tudball.
Correct.
I did it.
There it is.
Kevin Tudball. Not on Twitter anymore. Not on Facebook anymore. I just was not posting. So Instagram. Find me.
And a pro tip: he has a sketch account too, which some people even think is even cooler than his actual account. So it's like the indie version of his Instagram account.
And even more pro tip that I'm not gonna tell you. I have a secret sketch account.
Ooh,
that no one really knows
guys, exclusive. you heard it here.
If you can find me, you get a free print. No, just kidding. That's too many. First person to find me and figure it out.
There you go. Hey, we're going to hold them to it. it.
Great. All right, Kevin.
And we'll send a sticker, a Monsters of Design sticker in that too. Maybe even a shirt, because those are coming soon.
Yeah, merch is coming.
Merch is on the way.
It's gonna look good. Kevin, you are a gentleman and a scholar.
Oh, thanks for having me. I hope my ego wasn't too big for this episode.
Just big enough.
Just big enough. Nobody say anything.
Just silence.
Don't say it. Nobody think it. Okay, so that is our episode. I think
that's the episode.
I think it was just big enough.
Just big enough. All right.
So, anyways,
I think that'll do it. I can hear the music now. It's starting to play us out. It's starting to, Here it comes.
We'll see you next time, y'all. Bye.
Bye.